And I'm waiting for you to tell us to go, right, Bethany? I think that's right.
You can begin.
All righty. So first and foremost, hi, everybody. Hi, friends with me and hi, friends in the world. My name is Dr. Andrea D. Domain, affectionately known as Dre, and I'm your current ACPA president for the next 22 to 23 year. Yay, funness, we're live. Usually I'm engaging with everybody either in person or via Zoom. So it's good to be in real time with folks, and happy fallness to everybody around. First and foremost, I want to just say to us, give myself a little hug as well. Happy birthday to ACPA. We are 98 years old. That is deeply exciting. I am already counting up to our 100 years. So I hope you take a minute to celebrate with us overall. And I'll be chatting with you more about ways to engage with that through some discounting of our memberships and what have you. I also want to honor the fact that we are in Careers and Student Affairs Month. I'm super excited about that. Hopefully you've gotten a flurry of our emails about all the ways that ACPA is amazing and awesome to support our current and our future staff and who are doing the work for our students. So this live is a part of that overall, and I'm joined with some task force members. Before that, I do want to name some things you might want to get ahead of. So open that second browser, if you will. We are now taking advantage of discounted rates for our membership. So in honor of our birthday, we're offering a few discounts. So currently we're offering a discount for $98 for our individual memberships. Feel free to link into that as well. We're also offering a 20% discount for our graduate students. So you master students and doc students and what have you, by all means, take advantage of those discounts for you. We're also offering a 10% discount for ACPA 23. Now, I think everybody knows I am deeply excited about Convention 23. It is New Orleans. New Orleans is a fun place. We have not been there since the 80s. And I have gotten such good news and information that the membership of people that are attending is growing and growing. So it's definitely an event you don't want to miss. So please take advantage of our discounts for membership and our convention throughout. Overall, and if you already have a membership and you're good to go, this is also a great time to renew. So I know I personally last year renewed at this time, so I'm good for a while, and I will probably renew again to be good through 25. So this is a great time to take advantage of sustained membership overall. So take a minute to do that. While you're logging in and getting those deep discounts, I want to take a minute to welcome and introduce three amazing people I've had the pleasure of working with for the last few months. Hopefully people may or may not know that when I became president of ACPA, I had a list of strategic priorities that I wanted to get off the ground. And one of them was to really grapple with our current state of employment in higher education and our current climates. As many people know, we're navigating the Great Resignation and the Great Recruitment and all the things in the middle and burnout and all the things. And so I had the pleasure of convening a dynamic and amazing group of people, three of which are joining me right now, to have really great critical conversations about what is happening, but also to think about what we can do about it too. And so they are some brilliant minds, and I want to have them introduce themselves starting out. So for our panelists, I would love for you to be able to share your name, your pronoun, where you're joining us from, the scope of the work that you do. And because it's October and fall and fun, either a memorable Halloween costume you've had in your lifetime or your favorite fall activity. So with that being said, let's start with Jason, because Jason's the first person I see on my screen, and we'll start with Jason Cottrell.
Sure. So Jason Cottrell, I work for the U.S. Department of Education in the Office of Post-Secondary Education, and I'm responsible for Titles 3, 5, and 7 grant programs, specifically the eligibility and the performance reporting. So I'm the lead research analyst in my office. And I live in Rockville, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. And memorable costume, last year I wore a ghillie suit, and I don't know if people know what a ghillie suit is. Essentially I was out scaring small children dressed like a bush. And so I'm kind of blending in with the grass. And so I kind of jumped up and scare people as they were coming out for candy. So that was always fun. And my pronouns are he, him, his.
Awesome, thank you. Let's go with Ashley next.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Ashley Dobbs, she, her, hers. I serve as the Director of Student Housing at Georgia Gwinnett College in Lawrenceville, Georgia, just a skip outside of Atlanta. My favorite Halloween costume, at the start of the pandemic, I adopted an adorable puppy, and her name is Gia. And so I took the liberty of designing a duo Halloween costume. And so I created an Oreo, and she was an Oreo. She's a black and white Shorkie, and I was Milk. So I had a top hat with a straw. It was a thing, and my family and friends enjoyed it. So that is my most memorable Halloween costume. Welcome, everyone.
Awesome. That is so much fun. I love that. Lena, would you like to go next?
Sure thing. Hi, I'm so glad to be with you all. My name is Lena Crane. I use she, her pronouns, and I work with student wellness related programs and services at Bucknell University in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. What that includes is student health, counseling, nutrition, interpersonal violence prevention and advocacy, and student conduct and conflict resolution. This is my season, you all. I love fall. I love Halloween, but my favorite is the smell of fall. I guess that's the smell of decaying leaves, but I love it. And just love this time of year. Thank you for having us, Dre.
Thank you so much. And it's fair for me to go as well. So I do have a day job. So my day job is my pronouns are she, her, hers. I currently work at Davidson College. I am the Chief Strategy Officer there. It's a newer position, right outside of Charlotte and sister lands of the Catawba folks. My so I love Halloween, but then I like puns, and so my favorite Halloween costume ever is I dressed up as Scrubs, and I walked around as Dr. Dre. So people that knew me well knew to call me Dr. Dre. So they take them a minute, but it's always the reaction of their face that got me. So a little cheesy, but alas. Before we jump into our conversation, I want to give a little bit more framing of kind of our task force and what we've done in the last few months. And so, as folks know, I created the charge and I invited Dr. Rashada Breeden to be the chair of my task force. And through her leadership, we gathered probably a group of about 20 people to be in good critical conversation for us. We've been Zooming and on phones and emails for a long time, and we thought, it would be really great to have some real in-person time together. And so we were very fortunate with the support of our ACPA our governing board to support us to travel to Raleigh. So we went to North Carolina State in July, and we spent about 2 days together. In that time beforehand, we did some prep. And so we read the Sustainable Careers book by Professor Sally to kind of help frame us. And Rashonda led us through a lot of different exercises and dialogue groups to really extract our thinking overall. I want to name that we were really thoughtful about having graduate students and new professionals, as well as mid and senior level, and faculty across a variety of functional areas, geographically, institutional types. So we had a really, really great group. And from that work of those conversations, we have then moved into writing what will be soon to be a release document to all of our members, likely in the next few months, to really not only capture our conversations, but I'll also serve as a toolkit and a beginning benchmarking for folks to think about how to kind of work with grappling with some career challenges overall. So that's kind of like where we are. So that's coming. In the meantime, I want to talk to our panelists a little bit about some larger questions that we kind of thought about and reflected on that we want to share our thinking on. So the opening question that I'll offer to all of our panelists is, what are the lessons and takeaways that we should hold on to following the multiple pandemics we've had over the last year? So what comes up for you are some things that we should learn, hold, and keep in mind as we move forward in our larger work in our field of higher education?
I'd be happy to get us started. So a couple things come to mind right away, specific to our profession. One lesson, I think a positive lesson, was the significance that co-curricular experiences, student leadership, basically any sort of formative student involvement has on our lives. And in listening to the calls for normalcy from students and the sense of disruption, and I think a lot of that was really exacerbated without the experiences that we know shape connection and belonging and well-being. So in that sense, it was a gift to be reminded of what we are for students and for each other, and to not take that for granted. I think a secondary lesson, also maybe with a kind of silver lining mentality, is that the pandemics of supremacy and virus, I think they finally pushed us past feeling a need to deny ourselves some of the basic human things that we have been suppressing forever. And I have a feeling we'll talk more about that part.
I'll jump in. I think kind of contributing something that when finding the questions, what I wrote down, what I thought about is just the reality and the importance of humanity, and how humanity matters, and really the charge we had to put people first. I think in connection with the co-curricular experience, we do that anyway, but we also do the learning components, and I really know that I also had to center, right, in my work and just myself with my team and in supervisory capacities, just everybody's humanity, right? So we're navigating all these pieces, in our work environments, but also individually, right? And what does that look like for staff members who are experiencing anxiety around, anxiety, fear, true concern, can I come to work? Should I come to work? Is work really that important to me to even come and do the things that I am being tasked with or I'm expected to do? And I think that we really had to censor that in a way that we might have talked about in our previous iterations of how we exist. But I think that the pandemic's definitely highlighted that and the requirement of that. I think in connection with that, the redesign of work with intention. And so I think that, while we can assess our work and we can explore it and we can think about the pieces, when we're faced with, oh, we do this face to face, we cannot. And what are the things that we can't do online? And so what does that look like? And so I think that it was a positive and also a challenge. I would, having to do it, I would not say that it wasn't a challenge, but we had to really think about what we were doing and redesigning our work with intention so we could still achieve the goals of our institutions, but also, again, centering humanity, right? So our students and our staff. So I think those two really stick out to me. And I think that they still linger. And I really think that they are positives. I think they're additives to reconsider the work that we do and how we do it.
Yeah, I think that hits on a lot of the things that I was thinking about with this, is that we really kind of rethought that idea of what balance is and what it is to be an employee or supervisor in relation with the folks that we work with, and where our personal lives and career kind of are centered in the things that we do. And I think a lot of times we really personalize student affairs and higher education in general, and that almost becomes a big part of our identity because we embrace it so much. And often I think in the field of education, when people ask us, or are meeting us for the first time, what do you do? And I think a lot of times it's hard to describe, often because people don't realize that this is a job. But also, we tend to personalize those things because of how we center the profession itself. We're a very caring and interactive and personable profession. And so often, we take those things as being who we are, and that it isn't necessarily all that we are. And so we have to often separate. And I think the pandemic's really made us kind of step back and think about what it means to be a higher ed and student affairs professional, what's important in our own lives, and ways that we can kind of rethink how we're doing our work. And like Ashley said, that idea of like what can be done in person and what can't be done in person. And, I think we have stuck some of those things as, you can only do these things in person on campus at any given time. And that's not always the case. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities that we have that we need to really do better for ourselves. And that is, top down and bottom up. We have to rethink the work that we do in ways to improve our own lives and the lives of those around us. And we've got to put some stuff away, and it's time to go.
Yeah, I agree with all those things. What was on my spirit? Lots is on my spirit. A lot of things y'all all hit on, but there's a couple things that are in my mind right now. I have this vivid memory of so pre our COVID times, right? I was always a fast driven, high producing kind of person. And I remember for me in particular, that moment of coming back from ACPA 20 at the time. And we were just coming back from spring break. And I remember just kind of revving up and getting ready for all the events, and just that weird, like everything stopped. And it really helped me to think about, it is very much possible to slow down. And it had me questioning, what is success? And that is not necessarily about the high number of attendance, things I used to measure. Like, I want to make sure I have all the fill the room. I want to make sure we do 20,000, events or what have you. And I really kind of made me reevaluate, like, what am I really doing for my students at the time? Is that really productive for them? And for me, is that sustainable over time? So it really forced me for the first time in my 20-year career to slow down, pause, recenter what my purpose was, and have that change the way my work flowed. And so I had a lot of vivid memories over the last few years of really working with my staff in particular to have them see, like, I truly don't care about the numbers and these little quantifiable things. It's more about what impact of our student experiences. And that was really hard to untether, because so often our work is tied to staffing numbers and resources and justification of even like a DEI office existing, that it really made me reevaluate how to do my work very, very differently overall. So thank y'all for sharing that. So kind of building upon this question about lessons we learned and what we're holding, lots happening with our trends in employment right now. And I want to put a special attention to our entry level, right? So I am deep thinking about current graduate students, recent graduate students, people that have been in the field for a few years, who are in these entry level positions, who are grappling with probably a really unique, challenging time to enter and begin a career in this field. So I'm curious from all of you, what are some current documented or observable trends of climate you're seeing around entry levels in our field right now?
So I think as we were thinking about higher ed and student affairs, and especially the entry level, when it came to, drafting the document that'll be produced, what we were finding was that entry level folks over time, this hasn't just been, during the pandemic, that, they weren't lasting as long as they should. I think it's been a trend for decades. And, I think one of the studies I just pulled up, so 41.7% of people who leave the field leave in the first 5 years, and 75% leave in the first 10 years. And so that there are already trends that have kind of shown over time that people aren't sticking around student affairs and higher ed in general. And so, what is it that we can do to kind of improve those things? And, there's been a lot of studies over the past, 2 years that have looked at why people are leaving their roles, and this idea of the Great Resignation. And what it is, we're seeing that there are folks who are leaving because of pay. And I think, we always, recognize that exists, but it's also about that idea of balance in their lives, and being able to be a human, the idea of humanity in our own field. And I think what scares me about that is we are a field that is very human centric, and at the same time, what are we doing for our own colleagues and for our own selves that is making us leave the field quickly in that short amount of time? And that, I think, is where we really started to kind of look at how we were going to approach this document and these recommendations for the profession.
Ashley and I are eyeing each other like, you go, no, you go, no, you go. Ah, okay. I think there's a twofold trend here, well, maybe threefold, but some of it I think is temporary. The first half is that early career folks, you have to figure that folks who are entering the profession or even entering grad school now, think about where they were 2-3 years ago and what their experience has been like over the past couple of years, as opposed to what maybe some of ours were being socialized into the field. And so I think the first part is that they're being socialized differently, specifically to value or expect balance and boundaries and health, the things that Jason was speaking to, but in different ways. Like, you know, the way that some of my colleagues and I were socialized into the field was just unquestioningly hustle and compromise ourselves. And I don't think that's the case anymore. Like, we can care for the work and care for ourselves. So there's that. I think secondly, and this is what I believe will be the temporary part, is that, you know, rewinding that 2 to 3 years, some of us missed the formative experiences that drew a lot of us into the field. And so we're seeing it right now in the enrollment of grad programs. And that's the part that I think is temporary. People are saying, well, folks aren't coming into the field. Well, I think that's expected if they didn't have similarly formative experiences and opportunities to draw them into the profession. So I firmly believe that will rebound, just as now our returns to campus practice and evolution of campus practices. And then the third piece, and I can speak to this third piece empirically, is the type of work that early career folks are choosing, perhaps because of those formative experiences. I finished data collection in June for a forthcoming publication, and I found a majorly uneven distribution by functional area for new professionals who are coming into the profession, and the areas that they're choosing or not choosing and why really aren't surprising and are also connected to some of those themes of boundaries and well-being.
Thank you. You know, as I listen to my colleagues, I think about in addition to where our new professionals who are entering in the field or working in the field currently were a few years ago, I think about in comparison for folks who are not working in higher education, what does that look like? Right? The opportunity to exist in this notion of balance, right? That I wish everyone to have and in a way that is meets their needs. But I think about, you know, how does that show up in higher education? And I think that our new professionals are kind of giving us a space to think about the expectancy of what that looks like. So if I am, you know, just graduating college and, you know, I'm choosing my path, I did some things that I enjoyed in higher ed, and, you know, I was an engaged student or not, right? But someone supported me along the way, and I saw this thing called student affairs or higher education, and I'm interested in it. But then I see my colleagues go work for fill in the blank organization, and they don't have to do the performance, they don't have to do the dance, they don't have to, you know, put on the suit and tie, they don't have to do those pieces, and I have to, right? I also have to go get this extra degree, just all of these extra pieces that I think, you know, Dre, to your point about slowing down, right? And folks saw that everywhere because everyone was forced to do that. Then I have to enter into a workforce where the expectancy could be to do what was done before. And I'm seeing that because I might have seen that, you know, still at my institution, or I'm seeing that in my master every day if I'm having to pay for school. So I think about how our new entry-level professionals are challenging us to reconsider what this looks like, in addition to the compensation for that, right? You know, I think everyone could probably speak about how it is very challenging to fill positions, and how what are we doing to do that in exploration with compensation, right? Your benefits might be nice, but I need to pay my bills because inflation is high, gas is high, food is high, everything is expensive, and I still want to have some semblance of a life as everyone, right? And so I think about how those things really are interconnected when it relates to doing the work. And, you know, with all the other pieces, you know, Lynn, I look forward to your publication, but what will that look like? And I think that they are challenging us to really explore this with intention, or we're going to continue to have these issues as we go forward. I hope not, right? But I know I've had a position open for over a year, right? And that's challenging and it's hard, and pay pieces and all of these things I think intersect. Whereas in the past, previous institutions, finding folks to hire was not an issue. So I think that we're seeing that, and I think that it is documented not just in higher education, but I think just across the board of what employment looks like, and then higher education has significantly impacted that in connection to all the other pieces in the work that we do.
I think, yeah, both Ashley and you, Lena, hit on two things that I have like 1,000 questions that came up, and I'm going to ask only two of them. The first one, I want to go back to Lena, and please say decline if it's too much. I'm curious, you mentioned functional area shifting. I'm curious if you could speak to maybe a couple of examples of where you see some shifts, functional areas. And for Ashley, I'll give you this question early to hold to think about when you would like to respond. But I'm curious from you. I know that you may only have one campus experience, but I'm curious, as we're seeing new professionals or entry-level folks challenge like things like salary and the types of work and or what goes along with the expectations of work, how have you seen campuses or department heads or managers respond to the challenges of those overall? So those are both two things that are sitting with me overall. So what are we seeing for functional, and what are we seeing in terms of the challenge response from our institutions in these regards?
Sure. Well, I'll decline in this moment to name a specific functional area, partly because I don't want to. I want to be conscious of not harming those areas with limited airtime here. But I want us all to think about in the work that we do, maybe the most vulnerable, our colleagues across particularly student affairs, and which functional areas have been placed in the most vulnerable positions, whether it was last to leave for those who were leaving a physical space, going into a virtual or remote space, those who were last to leave, those who were invited at best, forced at worst to stay, to do things at a time where we didn't know about the virus as it evolved, folks who were asked to give of themselves even where they were seeing their loved ones and people who looked like them be subject to unspeakable violence, and set aside their own vulnerability to show up for other people. Like let's think about who was continuously made to be the most vulnerable. And then let's think about the students, whether they were undergraduate students or GAs, or even early career folks at the time, and what they were learning. As a scholar of higher ed, I am seeing this play out. What appetite does that leave or discourage for us? I'm looking down at a couple of my memos. I'm seeing one that says, that this participant had 4 supervisors in 2 years, and they said, well, I'm not going to sign up for this area where I think there's going to be just this, revolving door, and it felt really unstable. And so they're like, well, this is one thing that's not going to be my journey. Or they had a mentor say to leave, we are not valued in this type of work. It sounds like you have these few functional area options, chase one of these other ones, or that pull or that guilt or that lack of balance that they felt even as a part-time student employee. And so those are some of the things that maybe set the trajectory, just as some of those positive formative experiences could set a positive trajectory. So infer what you might about those functional areas, but I hope that gives you some sense of what we're learning.
Yeah, and even without disclosing functional areas, I appreciate you offering that. I think the questions that you raise are helpful for anybody, regardless of functional area overall, to sit with, right? So yeah, thank you for offering those reflective questions for us to sit with and think about how we have seen that or not seen that in our particular areas. So going back to you, Ashley, a little bit of what I mentioned before, and by all means, Jason and Lena, feel free to respond as well. I'm curious about what you've seen in terms of, and I was somebody I will name, I was a hiring authority recently. My job has changed a little bit, and I was hiring entry levels. And I did note, as Ashley mentioned, I did see different questions around salary. I did have different questions in my on-campus interviews, right? In ways that I didn't see like 2 or 3 years before. And so I'm curious, and there were times in which I think I had a lot of room to say yes in ways that I didn't quite have a few years ago. And there were ways in which I institutionally could not, do certain things that potential employees were asking me to do. And that was hard as a mid-level person, right? So I'm just curious from you or anybody on the panel, kind of what you've seen in terms of institutional response to this quote unquote pushback, which I think is more of a asking for, a different ask, if that makes sense.
Sure. I've also worked at a few institutions. I've worked at more than one institution through the pandemic. So shout out to my current employer, but I'm speaking in totality about pieces, right? And I'm conscious of that. So some of the things that I have either experienced and or seen is because of my position in the state of Georgia, my colleagues in this position in the state of Georgia, we have this listserv because we also have to engage with Board of Regents. And so we do a lot of peer engagement, I would say, and a nice supportive community about what is happening on your campus and how are we moving forward, particularly working in student housing as real frontline folks having to directly engage with COVID. And I need to name that it still exists. Still having to figure out how you put folks and ensure that your residential population is safe. And I think I'm speaking to everybody knows that. So some of the pieces that I've seen and or experiences some are actually just increasing salaries. If the capacity is there, there is a sister institution in the USG that just raise salaries. Like, this is what we need to do because we need to do it. In the state of Georgia, we received, state employees received the living wage adjustment, and it happened and it was great. And I do know that the narrative from policymakers was to support folks who were making, I believe it was under $35,000 a year to bring them to a sustainable living wage, which is great. Salary studies I know have been done and implemented, and also when you talk about kind of the incentives, when you think about searches and how you can incentivize work in a way that can potentially accommodate folks and their desires. Work from home days being able to work from home, I think, transformed the way people feel potentially about the work that they do, even if it is challenging. I think thinking about how you do your work and how we can meet the needs of the institutions and our students while reconstructing how we think about it and how we're doing it is really probably a significant piece of this. And then I think it also needs to be named that there are many institutions that just could not and cannot manage that. When we talk about enrollment decreases and just money in general, when you talk about staffing, if you have lines open for a long time, okay, do you need it? And okay, well, the institution needs that line. We need that money. So what are we doing with that? So those are some of the things that I have seen and or experienced. And Dre, you just brought up something about being a hiring manager. And maybe we'll get to it, but thinking about searches and managing and running searches and what level of, I think the pandemics really opened my eyes specifically to how you can design or how you need to redesign your search processes. Do we need to have the on-campus, I'm going to say it, the classist, let me bring you here, you pay for your stuff, you come here, you stand in front of all these people and you got to get a new suit and you show up in do we still need to do the performance? Do we still need to interview folks with these particular questions? Are we not asking about the content and your skill set and not asking if you like the color purple or blue? I just think that it really has shaped the way that we do our work, and being able to do stuff like this where you are doing interviews online, right? That you have cost saving pieces, and you can accommodate potentially, hopefully, folks, and you still might have, the inability for some folks. But I just think about the pandemic really exacerbated, I think, also how are we doing our searches, right? And for our young folks who might just be, who are just graduating, I know I just had to kind of figure it out and rob Peter to pay Paul later to do interviews. And I feel like our folks are like, I'm not doing that. Like I need to eat. So I can't get a $500 ticket to fly to wherever to come and meet with you all for 24 hours or 12 hours to go back home and then not get my money for another month and a half. I think that also is something that I think is important to tie into to my answer to your question.
Thank you so
Very
much.
much.
Go ahead, please go ahead, Lena. Go ahead.
I really appreciate what Ashley just shared, and I think that some of the resources that come to front of mind do carry a cost, but really another answer to the question is just permissions, like permissions to act flexibly for hiring managers, permissions to give our teams what they need, whether it's to do something differently through a hiring process, to kind of shed what HR or general convention says like has always been done, and for early career folks, permissions to receive those things. Practically, I think that there's a need for increased supervision and management training, increased training on the practical components of our work, like thinking beyond the theoretical. There have been a number of things that have come out that have said folks felt ill prepared for the work. And so if we think that we will always have the luxury of only like thinking in developmental stages instead of like, how do we make a call when a student's been hospitalized, or being taught to value assessment, but nothing about like building an assessment culture from total scratch, or like, I think there's a bit of a gap between the way we talk about the profession and what it really entails, especially in the past 3 years. And so permissions all around. And then I think a resource to that end is what we're providing, the publication, this map of actions.
Thank you. And I think both Ashley and Lena, and I want to bring Jason back into this too, y'all are hitting on kind of what the next questions that come up for me are what are the resources that you think are needed for entry level and or their hiring managers in this current context overall. So we talked about a lot of different things, and Lena, you started us out with one of them. I'm curious of what are some other resources that come to mind for hiring managers and entry level folks who are navigating all this?
I'll go. I think so. A lot of the things that we have talked about for years in student affairs are still things that we still need. And I think that we are starting to get there. And I think like for hiring managers, for example, things that people are looking for, things like just putting in the salary band into your announcements and that type of stuff. But then at the same time, like we're also in, and I don't want to give too much away until the document is released, but I think a big piece of the conversations that we have had are how our positions are founded, and like how the work that we do is really based around this idea of the model employee and like what is a model employee, and that is founded in this idea of supremacy. And so I think when we're talking about that, we need to start breaking that stuff down. And I'm hoping that the resources that we're going to provide with this is something that employees and hiring managers, or prospective employees and hiring managers and entry-level folks can start having those conversations and how they're going to approach their work from moving forward. And what is it that hiring managers can do? And I think we look at the hiring manager as being somebody who is in these positions where you can't go outside of these boundaries. Well, okay, so those are the boundaries, but what can you do outside of the boundaries that you can bring into them? You know, there are opportunities that exist, and I think we've just always done things the way that they've been done. And I think there are opportunities to rethink the processes that are on our campuses. You know, you may not be able to, you know, provide, you know, that additional piece of the salary, but you may be able to, you know, do an extra day of telework, you know, during the week. And so instead of, you know, you're only allowed 1 day of telework a week, you can do 2 days of telework a week, you know, so that we can make adjustments to try to, you know, allow folks to be themselves and to embrace, you know, who they are as a human. Because I think a lot of times we leave the humanity piece out of the conversation when it comes to our work. And, you know, this is part of our lives, and our lives, you know, also kind of bring that in. The other piece is for the entry level folks, you know, what is it that you can do to challenge the status quo? You know, you've got to break down those barriers as well, and really rethink, you know, the work, because, you know, they've been trained, and we have all been trained based on our prior experiences. And so that's the way that we do things. And how can, as an entry level person, come in and say, that might be the way that you did it, but this is the way we're going to do it. And that's what we need, is we need those folks to come in and actually do those things and actually help push us away from, you know, this historical, you know, set of practices that doesn't always work. I mean, we, you know, even as undergrads, we're learning from the people that supervise us, you know, and that's the way that they did it, so that's the way we're going to do it. That's not the case. I think, you know, there are opportunities for us to actually, you know, push the narrative away from being one of, you know, a structure of work where we are doing things based on history. And it should be that. It should be history. You know, we need to look forward, and it's time, and we have this opportunity right here in front of us. And so in terms of resources, our people are our resources. And we're the ones that have to break those things down, and we have to have those hard conversations of, you know, we're going to work differently now. We have to, otherwise we're going to be back at the same conversation 10 years from now at ACPA's, you know, 108th, you know, birthday, you know, or 20 years at the 118th. And, you know, it's just, it's not fair to the future people of the profession, who want to do good. And I think we all came into this profession really wanting to do good things, for our communities and for our society. And the way that we do that is through the work. And if we're struggling, you know, as employees, or our employees are struggling, you know, they're not struggling in the work, they're struggling in the fact their lives aren't matching up with their own personal expectations of being a human.
I had a former awesome supervisor who used to say, recruitment is 360, but it doesn't begin at the interview. And so when we think about our hiring processes, and when we think about, you know, employment and being employees in higher ed, I think that that's something to also name and consider, right? So our current environments that we are working in, our current institutional environments, have a direct impact on what we then are putting out, like our output to bring folks into an organization or into a space or into a work culture that is also not challenging the status quo or continuing to do what was, and seeing people be harmed by that. We'll continue to be at a deficit of having folks who want to come work in the field and want to come do this rewarding, but often challenging or hard, you know, work. Specifically, I think about the handy dandy competencies, you can't see them, the ACPA and NASPA competencies. I still think that they are relevant, right? I think that we have the opportunity to really do I think, institutional assessments, but also self-assessments about who we are as professionals and how we are contributing to our organizations, and organizationally, how, like, what is our health? In that, I also think about grad preparation programs, and that's also at the master's level and at the doctoral level, and having supervision courses, right? So when we think about our new professionals coming into the field, potentially not learning how to be a supervisor outside of seeing folks that they have either been supervised by, that they take a tidbit from, or say, oh, I hate that and I won't ever do that. That I think we're at a place where that's not really sustainable, right? And so I don't know the data point and I don't know the resource. I'm sorry, but if folks don't leave jobs, they leave supervisors. I think they leave all of it personally. Like I think they leave the work and they leave the person who might be horrible to work under. I think CUPA HR exists. Our colleagues who work in HR and are committed to HR in higher education, they are an organization, they exist, they have resources, they have a knowledge center, they have conferences, and I think that there are ways to potentially engage directly with HR, to not see them as our arch nemesis, but to see them as real intentional partners, right? Because when we don't do something well with an employee, that can land us there. And I opt to not. But I do see the value of them being effective partners in our work, and in sustaining the work of our field. And then not a shameless plug, but at a former institution, I was trained in behavior-based interviewing. And so when I think about new professionals and just a skill set standpoint, but also just organizationally, and we think about our hiring practices and our procedures, it might be time to really do assessment of how we are interviewing folks, what language we're using, what questions we're using, and how that is impacting either positively or negatively their then experience to then transition into the organization, right? Because all of this is connected. None of this is separate. And when we talk about supremacist culture, we know that a lot of the practices that we do in relation to hiring, and making folks connected to our institutions and our campuses is rooted in supremacy and things of the past. And we can honor history and also, I'm going to say again, flip our work. And so I think about behavior-based interviewing as a way to potentially reduce bias, right? We're going to have them, we're human, but how are you asking questions about skill set and about work, and about the ability to do a function in a job, and not asking folks content that is harmful from the onset, and then you can't fill your positions and you wonder why, right? But they can, folks, new professionals may have a fear of then sharing that information because the field is small and everybody knows, right? So we continue the same narratives and the same practices, and then also wonder why we're getting the same results. And so I think those pieces are connected. Grad prep programs with supervision classes and courses on all levels, and I think that we just need to name that this is who we are, what we're going to do to be effective moving forward, in addition to the other pieces.
I really appreciate that, Ashley, and something that you shared it kind of moves me to say there are also pockets that we get uniquely right in higher ed. Like we are unique, and there are some things, that there are a lot of opportunities that call us to improve. But interestingly, I have a number of friends outside of higher ed who over the past couple of years are having their own conversations in their workplaces, and then in conversation with me saying, oh, this is normal in higher ed, right? And asking about some of what we do, how we care, how we gather some of our flexibility, believe it or not. And so I think it's right to find the good and the growth, because really it's not the work. Jason said it's that our lives are not aligning in some places. And kind of on a near parting note, is that there is a surge of people who are doing our work, but in more consulting or service provider type ways, like very specialist roles in a very service provider way. And I think that is a bold reminder of what this work with boundaries would look like if employers don't change. Like if we tell our student activities friends, like, yep, keep burning those candles at both ends, like keep, carrying 0% for yourselves, or else, guess what? There's a vendor space now that they can bop in, bop out. And our people, our best people will go there if we don't start treating them with respect. And so I hope we'll be called to keep the good, find the growth, and that what we will soon share with the profession will be a bit of a map on how to do better.
Thank you all so much. My head is spinning on all different things. And like Lena mentioned, sadly, we're at that near closing mark. So one, I will say, if there's anybody who is tuning in with us, if you have a question, now is the time to ask this. And I have a closing question that perhaps y'all aren't prepared for, but that's okay. So I recently was in Raleigh, North Carolina State with our ASH president. We did our collaborative conversation on joy, community, and care. So that's still very much in my heart and spirit. And so as we talk about, the work of our task force, it feels heavy, it feels arduous, right? And I'm wondering, for all of you, whether it's you personal or maybe the work that we've been working on so far, where do you see joy in our work right now, right? Whether it's the work of our task force or the possibility of joy with kind of what we're kind of ruminating with overall. I'm like, I would love to know your thinking on, as a closing thought, where there's either joy or perhaps hope in all of this overall, because it does feel often heavy at times. So anything in that regard? Go ahead, Ashley.
Right. I have joy and really hope because we are having these conversations. I think that there's often too many times where we recognize that and this can be in any facet of life from work, we recognize that something is a challenge or something isn't necessarily running the way it should be, or something is, to Lena's point, burning at both ends, and we're seeing the outcome. We just don't do anything to prevent it or to stop it in advance. And I think to be at a place where we can have very, very open and honest dialogue that can be supported with data, and also just anecdotally about where we are and where we're going, and why we need to really reconsider these pieces, is hopeful. I haven't heard too much, well, we just got to do that because, I think that in the past, I know that I've heard that, and I might have been guilty of even saying that. And I think that the pause and the stop really has shifted that. And so I'm very hopeful that we don't wordsmith this work and wordsmith this challenge, and that we really, really are setting ourselves on a path towards action. So in 18, we're celebrating 118 years, we're not circling back to, well, why didn't we make the change, right? And why didn't we censor humanity and our people, for the good? So I'm very hopeful because I'm really, really pleased and happy that we are having this dialogue and this conversation and moving things forward.
Agreed. I feel hope and joy all the time, but something that is giving me a lot of hope related to this is how the connected conversations have gone to date. I think, part of the way supremacy conditions us to operate is in fear. And so, boundaries can feel really good. Something different can feel really good. And that gives me a lot of hope if we think back to where we were 3 years ago and saying, oh my goodness, is our whole profession going to be moot because of these months that we're parted from each other? Or, oh my goodness, will we ever return to whatever we did? And we did some things differently in really healthy ways. So difference can feel good. And that continues to give me hope as we deepen or operationalize, what comes from these conversations. And joy is everywhere, including in the time that we, the folks on this call, shared back in July, and some of the good that I know will come from that.
I think people have been much more reflective, and we're starting to realize that we need to take time for ourselves and our family. And I don't think we always do that. And especially in student affairs. My background was in orientation. And so I just recognized I didn't have summers. I don't get summer vacations. And that was the reason that I decided to go in a different direction when I left campus life behind. That's hard. Not getting the same time as your significant other would normally get, because you're planning things around summer orientation. And that goes into the fall, because then you have week of welcome, and you've got move in, and you've got trainings in the spring, and you've got family weekend in the fall. And so you just need to be there. So you take your vacation in January, and let's be honest, nobody wants to take a vacation in January where it's snowing in this hemisphere. I know women who plan pregnancies around summer orientation. We shouldn't be in a profession that we have to do that. And I now, I see people recognizing the need to do things with themselves, with their family, with, and taking that time, even if it's, I'm seeing more people taking like long weekends. And that's where I get a little bit of joy, is seeing people taking that time where they're going hiking in the mountains. Fall, and we started this conversation around the fall, and this is one of my favorite times of the year. My yard is covered in Halloween decorations right now. I got married on Halloween, so this is my time of year. And we decided we're going to Hershey Park tomorrow night for the Halloween thing. And so it's that type of stuff that I think we're doing more, and that's the joy. And so I think that's where I see hope in all of this, is that we're recognizing our own humanity a little bit more, and that we're not just, kind of cogs in a wheel trying to get things done, and students in, students out. And there's more to it. And, there's more to these students. And when we're reflective of who we are, we're going to be reflective of who our students are. And so that's also the big piece of this conversation is, if we can't be good to ourselves, how can we be good to the students that are coming in? And that's where we need to be concerned, is making sure that we recognize people. And as we've been sitting here having these conversations, I've been thinking about like the way that we've done things, and the way that we need to kind of align the work that we are doing on these pieces to the work that has been done. How are we going to look back at the competencies now after we push this document out, this call to action, and how are we going to align those competencies now with this call to action? Because maybe there are things that are there in the competencies that need to change. Maybe there are things in the grad prep programs that need to change, that have to change. And how are we just generally, the Halloween decorations are going off now. How are we just generally going to make our profession a better place for more people? And we have to illustrate who we are as individuals, and we have to show our identities in all of these things. And I don't think that we have done a really good job. We talk about it a lot, but we need to go out and actually just say, this is who I am. And so you're going, my own humanity, my personhood is more important than this position. And so either you're going to accept me as my whole self, or I can go elsewhere. And I think that's where we need to go. And, we need to just do better for ourselves and better for our people.
That just made like warm fuzzies in my heart, all of it. No, and thank y'all for taking that question. And I know that was quite unexpected, but I hope it left all of you and the folks that were tuning in with us and who will watch later thinking about where they find joy in all of this overall. So I do think that's really deeply important, is to yes, the grappling is hard, and I do appreciate the opening of dialogue, but there is joy in this too, overall. So thank y'all for doing that. So thank y'all for, thank you to our panelists for joining us today. As Jason and Lena and Ashley alluded to, we will be communicating more on behalf of the task force in the next couple of months. So please stay tuned to your email and social media about that. I want to do one last reminder about our discounts for ACPA Day, our birthday, our 98th birthday. Again, $98 membership is today. It is ending at 11:59 p.m. 20% off for our grad memberships, 10% off for ACPA 23 overall. And again, you can still renew and get that extended longer, even if you are already a current member. So thank y'all for joining us. We appreciate y'all